It was a quiet Thursday night at West Hollow Medical Center when everything changed. The hospital was running on a smaller staff than usual, as most people didn't like working the graveyard shift. Still, 3 nurses, Emma, Carla, and Brooke, volunteered to stay late. Emma wore her usual pink scrubs, cheerful and sweet, always offering a kind smile to patients. Carla was in her light blue uniform, known for being calm under pressure. Brooke, in green, was the energetic one who kept everyone laughing, even during the hardest moments. They were good friends, always signing up for the same shift when they could. That night, they were assigned to the Old South Wing, which had recently reopened after being closed for years due to renovations. Most of the wing was still under construction, and only 2 patient rooms were in use. The hallway lights flickered, and the air smelled faintly of mold and chemicals. Still, the nurses didn't seem bothered. They had each other, and the night was supposed to be easy. Just a few patients, most asleep, and some light paperwork to finish before sunrise. Everything seemed normal for the first few hours. Around 2 a.m., the hospital security cameras caught the 3 nurses walking into the South Wing together. After that, no one saw them again. When the morning shift arrived at 6 a.m., the nurses were nowhere to be found. At first, people thought they might have gone out for coffee or taken a break outside. But their phones, car keys, and even Brooke's jacket were still in the staff room. Their charts were half finished, and 1 cup of tea was still warm. Panic began to spread. Security checked the cameras again and again, but none showed the nurses leaving. Police were called. A search began immediately. Every hallway, every stairwell, even the hospital roof was checked. Sniffer dogs came in. Helicopters flew over nearby woods and rivers. Nothing. It was as if the 3 women had simply vanished into thin air. Rumors started among hospital staff. Some said the South Wing was haunted. Others blamed the nearby construction crew, pointing fingers at anyone who looked suspicious. Emma's mother cried every day outside the hospital entrance, holding up photos of her daughter. Carla's brother came to town and refused to leave, setting up a board of clues in his motel room like a detective. Brooke's fiancé visited the wing at night with a flashlight, calling her name again and again, but no one ever got answers. Months passed. New nurses came in, but no one wanted to work the night shift anymore. The South Wing was sealed off once more, this time not for repairs but out of fear. The police said they had no leads. The case turned cold. Most people started to move on, except the families who refused to stop searching. 6 months later, everything changed again. A group of city workers were sent to fix a drainage issue in the area behind the hospital. Rainwater had flooded part of the street, and they believed a large pipe near the back lot was blocked. They arrived early in the morning, wearing orange vests and boots, not thinking much of the job. One worker crawled into the edge of the large concrete pipe and started pulling out mud and trash with a shovel. That's when he saw something strange, fabric. At first, he thought it was just old laundry or a tossed hospital sheet. But as more was pulled out, they realized there were 3 sets of clothing. Scrubs, pink, blue, green, all stained with dirt and soaked with brown water. Next to them were 3 pairs of white shoes, partly rotted but still recognizable. One of the men dropped his tools and called out, voice shaking. Within minutes, the site was surrounded by police tape. Something terrible had happened, and now the world would finally begin to uncover what. Police quickly arrived at the scene behind West Hollow Medical Center, their sirens breaking the early morning silence. The muddy pipe, surrounded by orange cones and loose bricks, was now considered a potential crime scene. Officers stepped carefully around the scrubs and shoes, not wanting to disturb anything that could be evidence. Forensics teams were called in immediately. Cameras flashed as they documented the clothing. 1 set of pink scrubs, 1 blue, 1 green, each matching exactly what Emma, Carla, and Brooke had been wearing the night they disappeared. The clothes were not just dirty. They were torn in places, with strange smears of black and red that didn't look like natural stains. The shoes looked as if they had been taken off carefully, not torn away or lost during a struggle. It was as if someone had placed the outfits there deliberately. But why? And where were the nurses? No bodies were found in or near the pipe. Police sent divers and search dogs into the surrounding sewer tunnels, but the system stretched for miles. Still, the discovery was enough to reopen the investigation in full force. The nurses' families were called right away. Emma's mother fainted when she saw the pictures. Carla's brother drove to the site within the hour. Brooke's fiancé stood silently by the edge of the pipe, staring down into the darkness as if trying to see something others couldn't. Inside the hospital, old fears returned. Staff began whispering again about the South Wing. One janitor said he heard screams echoing from the pipe room weeks ago, but didn't report it because he thought it was just the wind. Others remembered strange power outages and flickering lights near the storage rooms in that wing. A new theory began to form, that there was a hidden tunnel or maintenance shaft connecting the South Wing to the pipe where the clothes were found. A city engineer confirmed this possibility. Back when the hospital was first built, a maintenance crawl space had been included under the South Wing, meant for pipe access and emergency wiring. It had been sealed years ago after budget cuts, but the plan still existed. Investigators pushed to find the entrance. After several days of searching, they found a rusted metal door behind a false wall in a storage room at the far end of the South Wing. It took 2 officers and a crowbar to force it open. The space behind it was cold and damp. A narrow stairwell led down into darkness. They found more signs of human presence there. Old food wrappers, broken flashlights, a blanket, and a rusted bucket. One wall had scratches, deep ones, like someone had tried to claw their way out. Police followed the tunnel for nearly 30 feet before it split into 2 narrow pipes, one of which led directly to where the scrubs had been found. What had happened in that dark space was still unclear, but now there was no denying that the nurses had been taken or had fallen into that tunnel. The biggest question remained. Were they alive when it happened? And who else might have known that this hidden passage still existed? The police now suspected someone working inside the hospital may have known about the tunnel. They began questioning old maintenance staff, reviewing employee records, and pulling logs from a night the nurses disappeared. One name came up again and again, a former maintenance worker named Hank Darber, who had quit just 2 days after the nurses went missing. At the time, no one thought much of it. Hank was quiet, kept to himself, and had worked in the South Wing during renovations. When police tried to track him down, they learned he had left town shortly after quitting, with no forwarding address. It was as if he, too, had vanished. But unlike the nurses, Hank had left behind something, the hospital's master keyring, which was never returned. Investigators now believed Hank may have used those keys to access the hidden passage and somehow trapped the nurses inside. But why? Was it a random act of madness, or was there something darker hiding behind the walls of West Hollow Medical Center? As police dug deeper into Hank's past, they uncovered a disturbing history of complaints, including one from a nurse who had once reported feeling unsafe around him. Her complaint had been quietly filed and forgotten until now. With new urgency, authorities launched a manhunt to find Hank Darber. He might hold the final answers to what happened in those terrifying hours 6 months ago. And more importantly, he might be the only one who knew whether the 3 nurses had ever made it out of that tunnel alive. The search for Hank Darber stretched across counties. Police shared his photo with news stations and printed it on flyers taped to street poles, gas stations, and grocery store windows. A few tips came in. Someone thought they saw him at a bus station. Someone else claimed he was camping near an old quarry, but nothing led to confirmed location. In the meantime, detectives worked to rebuild a timeline of the nurses' last hours. Security footage from the South Wing was enhanced and reanalyzed. In one frame, moments before the nurses disappeared, a blurry figure was seen down the hall, barely visible near the emergency exit sign. The image was too grainy to identify the person, but the height and build were consistent with Hank. A tech expert tried to clean up the video, but it was still not clear. However, one thing stood out. Emma had turned around briefly, as if someone called her name, before following the others around a corner. That was the last time they were seen on camera. Days passed. Police reopened parts of the sealed-off wing and found additional clues. A flashlight under a sink, fingerprints on a broken door handle, and old receipts tucked behind a pipe. One receipt had a date from the week before the disappearance and was signed H. Darber. As evidence built up, public attention grew. News vans lined the hospital's front gates. Reporters begged for interviews with staff and family members. The hospital issued a statement saying they were cooperating fully, but inside, fear had settled deep into the hearts of the nurses still working there. Some staff refused to go near the south wing, even during the day. Others quit entirely. Then, one evening, a call came into the local police station. A man at a truck stop 80 miles away had seen someone matching Hank's description sleeping behind a dumpster. Officers rushed there, but by the time they arrived, the man was gone. Still, they found something chilling, a metal key ring hidden under a pile of newspapers. It matched the description of the master keys that had gone missing. Nearby, inside a garbage bin, police discovered an old notebook. Most pages were torn out, but one entry was still readable. It was written in shaky, rushed handwriting and said, "They wouldn't stop screaming. I told them it was only for a little while. I didn't mean for it to go that far." Investigators now believed Hank had kept the nurses trapped in the hidden tunnel for days, maybe longer. They speculated he had created a small room in the pipe system using old supplies from the hospital's storage. But eventually, something must have happened. The oxygen would have run out, or water may have flooded the tunnel. There were no signs they had escaped. Still, without bodies, no one could be sure what truly happened. The families clung to hope. Carla's brother held a press conference begging Hank to come forward. "If you're out there, please, just tell us where they are. We need to bring them home." Days turned into weeks. Then, during a city sewer maintenance project, another breakthrough came. In a lower part of the pipe system beneath the hospital, workers uncovered a rusted hatch. Behind it, they found a hidden chamber. The air was stale. The walls were covered in scratch marks. Inside were 3 small cots made of old blankets, empty water bottles, and a single photo taped to the wall. Emma, Carla, and Brooke, smiling in their scrubs. The room was empty. No bodies. No signs of violence. Just silence and the memory of suffering. A small audio recorder was found buried beneath one of the beds. It was damaged, but after days of restoration, technicians recovered several minutes of sound. Faint breathing, whispered voices, a woman's voice saying, "Hold on, they're coming. Someone will come." It was Brooke. Then static. The audio cut out, but it was enough to prove that they had been alive, at least for a while. With no Hank, no bodies, and no final answers, the case remained open. But something else began happening. Nurses working night shifts in other parts of the hospital started reporting strange things. Footsteps in empty halls, soft crying sounds through the vents, and on one occasion, a nurse swore she saw someone in pink scrubs walk past the break room. When she followed, no one was there. Some called it imagination. Others believed the hospital itself carried the weight of the missing girls, their voices echoing in the dark halls where their lives had been stolen. 6 months after the 3 nurses vanished and their muddy uniforms were found by the sewer workers, West Hollow Medical Center was never the same again. The hospital tried to move forward. They cleaned the south wing, repainted the walls, and installed new cameras in every hallway. But no fresh paint could cover the heavy feeling that still hung in the air. Nurses whispered during night shifts, afraid to go down certain halls alone. Some staff left without notice. Patients who had no idea about the missing nurses sometimes complained of hearing crying at night or seeing a flash of color, pink, blue, or green, disappear around a corner. It was always blamed on exhaustion or medication. But those who had worked with Emma, Carla, and Brooke knew better. Their memory lingered like a shadow in every shift, every dark hallway, every silence between heartbeats. Then, one autumn morning, the hospital received a call from a private investigator named Ellen Stroud. She had taken an interest in the case after reading about it online. She believed there were still pieces missing, especially about Hank Darber. She had managed to trace financial records and found that someone had used a bus card registered in his name just 4 days earlier in a small desert town 2 states away. Police raced to the location, a dusty motel by a highway. In room 6, they found Hank, thinner, older, and clearly terrified. He didn't resist arrest. He barely spoke. Once in custody, he finally confessed, not to murder, but to being part of a plan he hadn't fully understood. According to Hank, someone else at the hospital had approached him months before the nurses vanished. A man in a lab coat, someone Hank assumed was a doctor, had asked for help accessing the sealed tunnel under the south wing. He said it was for off-the-books research involving isolation experiments. Hank was paid cash to open the tunnel, bring supplies, and say nothing. He agreed, believing it was strange but not illegal. Then one night, the man asked him to trap the nurses in chamber, saying it was just for observation, that they'd be let out in a day or two. Hank agreed again, this time with guilt, but said when he returned to release them, the tunnel entrance had been sealed from inside. The man was gone. The hospital had already called the police. Hank panicked, left town, and had been hiding ever since. Police demanded to know who the doctor was, but Hank didn't know his real name. He only remembered a badge that said T. Givens. Hospital records showed no doctor by that name, but when they searched deeper into older files, they found that 20 years ago, a research assistant named Thomas Givens had been fired for experimenting on patients without approval. He had disappeared after his dismissal. A sketch of Givens was compared with security footage from the night the nurses vanished. The match wasn't perfect, but it was close enough to raise alarms. It seemed Givens had returned under a fake identity and used Hank to carry out something far darker than anyone had imagined. Investigators now believe that Givens had planned an entire trap to test how long humans could survive in isolation underground. A sick, twisted experiment disguised as hospital routine. And he had chosen Emma, Carla, and Brooke as his subjects. But without bodies, no one could say exactly what happened to the nurses after they were locked away. Were they rescued secretly? Did they escape and vanish? Or did the experiment end the way Givens expected it to, with silence? Despite nationwide alerts, Thomas Givens was never found. His name was added to the FBI's most wanted list. Meanwhile, a quiet garden was built outside the hospital, with 3 benches and a plaque that read, "For Emma, Carla, and Brooke, may light find you wherever you are." Sometimes, visitors left flowers on the benches. Sometimes they left 3 folded nurse uniforms, pink, blue, and green. And every now and then, when the wind passed through the trees just right, someone would swear they heard soft footsteps and 3 voices humming an old lullaby, still waiting to come home.